So, I just finished the monthly class with the shoe surgeon on building my own custom Air Jordan 1, and I chose to do mine in the Chicago colorway. And I wanted to share some kind of thoughts that I had about the class and the content. So, generally, do I think it was worth it? Absolutely, yes. I think, for the cost and the service and the end result, absolutely it was worth it. Do I think it's a replacement for an in-person class? While I have not taken one, I don't think it's the same thing. I imagine it's not the same thing. But with that said, though, clearly it was good enough to take somebody who's never made a shoe before, let alone designed a shoe, sewn. It's taken somebody like me with no skills and has given me the knowledge to and education to produce something like this. So if that's testament enough to it being effective, then yes, it is effective and it is definitely worth it. Some things that I really loved about the class. I think the way that they broke down the material in modules and kind of paced people, it helped people like me who typically leave things, at least in the school setting, till the very last minute to finish it. It broke down the work in a way that I didn't feel rushed to do it, but I didn't feel like I had all the time in the world to procrastinate on it. So it struck a great balance for me in terms of where they anticipated the harder part, the harder skill sets to learn, i.e. sewing, for people that have never sewn before. Part of the classes, you buy a sewing machine, and depending upon the investment you want to make, you either get a kind of heavy duty home version of a Singer sewing machine, just a traditional looking sewing machine, or you could invest thousands of dollars into a post-bed machine like the one that the shoe surgeon uses for making shoes. I had never sewn before, so I bought the Singer, the kind of the home sewing machine, and having never sewn before, that particular module took me a while to kind of master. I did hours of sewing practice with leather, which is a particularly difficult material to sew. But I think it was great. Another great thing that I loved about the class, which is I think kind of important when you're dealing with hard skills, like in the real world and not so much soft skills, which I'll get to later. You want to get as much guidance as possible on setting up your environment. So one of the great things is before the class started, you get this list of tools you need to buy. So the monthly offered, at the time I took the class, they offered a bundle of tools, of particular cobbling tools like elasting pliers, bone folder, a bunch of other tools, a very long list of things, lasting nails, kind of conveniently put into a package for you. It also included lasts, which is a big thing, and a bunch of raw materials. So like the leathers, the red, the white, the black, for this colorway was one of the options. And a lot of the inners, like the foams, the filler, among other things, that you need to make the shoe. And they're kind of harder to find, harder to source in smaller quantities. So that was nice that they packaged it in kind of something you could just click and buy. And I did do kind of a cursory glance at looking at just purchasing those things kind of one-off, and it was a reasonable enough deal that I didn't feel like expending any more energy to putting it together kind of an ad hoc list of the same tools needed for this course, and just went ahead and bought their kit. I'm glad I did, because that kit also includes the paper template for the leather cutouts for your size that go along with the last size that you buy, and those are an absolute necessity to do this class. I know there were some other people that purchased templates from other custom shoemaking websites, and for this particular course, I think they marry kind of old school shoe cobbling techniques with new sneaker construction in a unique way that other people don't. And so for this particular class, I would kind of recommend just going all in and just buying the kit with their, or at least just buying their size templates, their paper templates to use during the class, because it's one less hurdle that you need to get over skill-wise to learn how to build a shoe from the ground up. And that's kind of the theme of this exercise for me. I've always been interested in cobbling or shoemaking. I've gotten into sneakers maybe in the last 2 years, and it's imposing when there's this long list of skills that you don't have to make a shoe, and you see this shoe you want to make on the other side of that massive mountain of skills that you need to attain. And I found that the smallest amount of hurdles in my way to get to that kind of led to the most success. So one of the things that I made a point of doing is not giving myself biting off more than I could chew, essentially. So I use this class as kind of a first go round to say, is this something that I would enjoy? So I didn't pick any crazy materials. I didn't, as much as I love stingray leather, I thought that would be sweet. I wanted to kind of work with the traditional materials. I know some other of my classmates were a little bit more adventurous, but I wanted to take as many variables out of the equation as possible. And I think that worked well. I think that if you were to just take this class just to get the experience, take this as a practice run. You're not meant to have a perfect shoe at the end of this. You'll get to about halfway, and you will know for sure that you are not going to get a perfect shoe out of it. And then once that kind of weight is lifted off your shoulders, if you don't already get to that conclusion before you start the class, it makes it a lot more fun because you can focus on just building the skills, not worrying about perfection to a certain degree, and just kind of enjoying the process, which is fun. It was a lot of fun. And one other thing that this class helped me with was to be kinder to myself when I don't have perfection. So an example being like the stitching on this heel. I don't know if you can see it, but the stitching, this was one of the first pieces I stitched. The stitching is very close together and not even. The feed of the leather through the sewing machine wasn't even, so the space of the stitching was off. And I notice it. I see it. I can see it from about 3 feet away. But at the end of the day, who's looking at your sneakers that close? 1, and 2, do you even care what other people think about the shoe that you made? Because this isn't for anybody else. This is just for you, or for me in this case, taking the class. So I think, yes, it was worth it. The content was great. Some of the things that you won't get getting this class, which is why I don't think it's a substitute for an in-person class, is you don't get what am I specifically doing wrong here? And how can I fix it? How can I save it? So there is this peer forum available as part of this class that allows you to kind of post progress pictures, ask questions to other people, one of the other 20 people that are taking this course with you in your group. And the majority of us are all new to shoemaking, so it's not, we can only offer comments based on kind of what we know about our own journeys. So I don't think it's a replacement for having somebody over your shoulder that has done this 100+ times before and can say, oh, I've done this in the past, this is what you should do, kind of in the moment while you're doing it. Some of the times that that's not so great in one sense, but it's great in another sense, where you kind of have to rely on yourself to get out of to overcome hurdles. And some of the things you can't fix, like if you cut off too much liner, like I did in one of the steps in the shoemaking process. There's kind of an inside liner that once you flip it inside out and you glue the liner to the upper, there's an excess that you can trim off But in some cases, it's needed for other steps. And I got overzealous. I was excited that I finished this part of sewing, and I cut all of the liner off, the excess liner off, which I needed to help attach the top part to the toe, and that kind of made the next steps really difficult. And my shoe was imperfect because of it, but I didn't have anybody there for me, with experience to help me kind of in the moment. So I just had to kind of make do with what I did. I made my bed. I had to sleep in it, and at the end of the day, it really doesn't make a whole bunch of difference. And I did a lot of those similar mistakes on the shoe. The shoe is very far from perfect, but I still love it. And I know if you were I'm not unique in the sense that I'm okay with imperfection. I think that there's just a lot of pride in doing something like this from scratch, and it is an amazing feeling to have a shoe, a physical manifestation of the work that you put in over just a month, as a testament to your effort and the new skills that you have. So that's great. Let me see what else. I think the way that they broke down the material, the classes is great. I think the time frame is great of the whole class, just doing it in 30 days. This kind of came to me in a point where I'd love to try new things. I really, I'm living with more intent, and I want to do things more so for, with direction. And one of the things is I want to spend 30 days learning something new that other people might think is silly, but it's something I've always wanted to do, and this kind of fit perfectly within that window. And you'd be surprised what you can accomplish with a full day job, family, other obligations, young kids. It's still something that you can do. It's difficult, it's a stretch, but what you give up in time per se to other obligations, you gain in exuberance just generally to your life, because you're doing something you haven't done before, and it gives you just kind of this whole nother level of confidence. And I've done things that have pushed me outside of my comfort zone, not with shoemaking, but in other respects, other hard skills, woodworking and stuff. And this is a great, not nearly as messy as woodworking, but it's a great opportunity, a great field, a great subject to kind of just dive into for 30 days. Very little overhead in terms of what you need to get started. Maybe $1,000 or so of tools and material all in from nothing. And at the end of it, 30 days, you have the skills and a finished product. But you also have a lot of kind of the hard materials that you need to build another shoe. So your cost per shoe goes down for every other custom shoe you make. So if you intend on doing more of these, the cost per shoe is even less. So ultimately, I think this is a great hobby. It's functional. It's fun. It's not fiscally responsible, because you have to buy a shoe to break down to get the sole to make your own custom shoe. So essentially, you're paying for a Jordan. I bought mine off of eBay, which helped kind of keep the cost down. I think it was a worn once, one zip up Air Jordan 1 that had seen the pavement one time, and the soles were perfectly fine on it, for using as a donor pair. So you can find deals like that, or you could just go to Foot Locker and buy their Air Jordan 1 low for $90 in white and just use that. But I was going for the Chicago colorway, so I wanted to find the red sole to go with the red leather. And and I took some laces off of a PSG Air Jordan 1 that I had, and I think it really it really completes it. So how does this compare to other classes? So I mentioned hard skills versus soft skills. So I have taken any number of different soft skill trainings online. I've used traditional learning platforms like lynda.com, the now LinkedIn Learning. I've used Udacity, Pluralsight for other kind of soft skills related to technology or business or marketing, creative pursuits. But I think it's very different when you're learning about hard skills versus soft skills. I think while it might be fundamentally easier for somebody to say, hey, this is how you do it, and I'm going to show you, and then you do it, it's with hard skills like making things in the physical world, it's harder to do virtually because of, like I said, you don't have somebody there over your shoulder telling you you're doing it wrong, and it's irreversible, effectively. But with coding, you could, write a poor line of code, and then it just doesn't compile, and you can't execute your program, and then you just go back and you retype some things, right? So the cost of your mistakes are much greater in this kind of pursuit, and I think it's a little bit more difficult for hard skills to be learned virtually, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it is effective at the end of the day, because it is still effective. It is not for nothing, and I think if you're interested in it, you'll find the same thing as me. I think at the end of the day, it was really great to see the other people in my peer group complete their shoes. I was really impressed. Some of the designs were wild. Truly some true artists in this peer group, which is good. Some people that had some sewing experience, so you could see what great straight evenly spaced stitches looked like, and it inspired me for kind of future designs if I were to kind of pursue this in another iteration. But yeah, I think in terms of part of the course is you have to provide feedback to other people in your peer group. It's kind of like a mandatory part of each module, and it was nice. It was a little pedantic sometimes, but I think it's a good reminder to be engaged. And I think the frequency in which they did it wasn't so much that you said this is too tedious for me to do and you lose interest. I think it was the people that I were kind of more commonly commenting on were, I was genuinely invested in their journeys, and I'm really happy. I was happy to see their progress, and maybe talk them off the ledge a couple times when they wanted to, quote unquote, throw their singer off a balcony, throw their sewing machine off a balcony. So, because leather can be particularly frustrating to sew. Some recommendations, if you were to take the class. I would say the way that the content and the workflows are formatted when I took this class, you have to switch between kind of the video portion of Dom showing you how to make the shoe and the kind of written instructions that I would assume were transposed by some of the content people at Monthly. And it's difficult to go back and forth. I would recommend that you watch each video at least twice before you're watching it while you're doing the steps. So at least 3 times for each video. And before you even touch materials, read through the written steps at least twice, I would say. And look at all of the linked pictures that they have, which I hope that they change. I hope that they make this all in one page for each step within each module to make it easier to follow. But at least when I came to it, my recommendation is go slow. Read the instructions over and over again. Watch the videos over and over again. They're not that long. I think the longest one's like 40 some minutes or 50 minutes. So at the worst, you're taking an extra hour out of your 3 or 4 days for that particular step. And that would kind of be my first recommendation. I would say be careful about your when you're cutting materials. I've found that you want to visualize what that piece is going to be used for on your shoe. So I say that as an example, like when you're cutting out like the eyelet, the lower eye stay here, you want to, when you're cutting these complex curves with the X-Acto knife, you want to favor kind of gradual, smooth lines instead of stopping and starting and trying to get like exactly on the line of the piece of the template that you're using. because at the end of the day, your eye will see those kind of jagged stops and starts in the cutting on the finished product. So I would say if you're going to do this, I would say favor smooth cutting, smooth, slow cutting actions instead of kind of fast, jagged, trying to hit the line, the traced line as much as possible. And then the other piece I would say is I struggled with putting the sole on the shoe at the end of the class. They give you so you get the last, but you don't get a lasting pole, which is the pole that the lasted shoe sits on, and that kind of frees up a hand to put on the sole. One of the things that I noticed is that the leather that I purchased was a little bit too thick for the sole size. So I'm an 11. So the inside last was sized for an 11 foot, which fits me perfectly. I would say that the thickness of the leather was a little bit thick, so it made it just a little bit thick width-wise. So I actually had to stretch the sole as I was putting it on, and it led to kind of some funky, almost like not straight. It's almost not perfectly straight on the back because I had to kind of stretch it and put it on because the cement is really sticking. You only have one shot to do this, to put the sole on the shoe, on the lasting board. But so I would say maybe consider going up half size in your donor shoe. So the next shoe I might try and get 11.5 donor shoe for my size 11 last, and kind of measure the thickness of the material. I might try an even thicker, maybe cordovan leather in my next shoe. And I'm hoping that maybe that extra kind of 0.5 millimeter of thickness will kind of fit in the sole nicely. You should be able to kind of just put the lasted upper into the sole and let it sit and not have to kind of stretch the sole to be the same width or length as the shoe, and then kind of hammer the top of the sole down to meet the leather that's been cemented on both sides. So those would kind of be my top 3 recommendations if you are going to do the class. Yeah, generally I had a great time. I think that it fit well within my busy working professional parent, husband life, the dynamic that I live in. And yeah, I would recommend anybody that has the free space to just take the jump and do something for yourself. And I think you're going to find a slightly better version of you a slightly more better, patient, humble version of yourself at the end of the course. Yeah, well, I hope you guys enjoy if you do end up taking the class, and you might have something cool like this to have for your own at the end of a class.